We've got all 4 legs ripped to uniform width, and we're going to let the planer do the rest of the work and square them up to exactly same dimensions. I'm going to run a chamfer along all 4 edges of each of the legs just to ease the edge. Over at the chop saw, I'm going to cut all 4 legs to length at 28 inches. I'm going to start by making a square cut, try to eliminate any planer snipe that might be on the ends of these legs and get the best part possible, free from any knots. For the end of the leg that I've determined to be the bottom, I'm going to run a chamfer along the bottom edge. Now that the legs are all prepped, it's time to make the mortises. Each leg is going to receive 2 mortises on the top. This mortise will be where it receives the outside apron of the table. So to make a 90-degree corner, we are going to make 2 mortises that match the same width and depth as we put in the aprons. They're just going to be inset from the edge a little bit to create that reveal. So I've adjusted the distance of the tenon jig a little bit further back than it was when we made the mortises on the cross member pieces. And since we want this flush to the top of the leg, we're using the stop block from before in its same location to butt the top of the leg up against. We've got it locked in, we're ready to make the mortise. I've cut all the top mortises in one side of each leg. There's going to be 2 mortises at the top of each leg, and the only difference is in the setup is now we've loaded the leg from this side against the stop block. So we're going to mortise the other 4 at the top of each leg, and then we'll do the corresponding mortises down below. It's time to set up for making the mortises on the bottom portion of the leg. This is as easy as the top portion. We're going to make a mark where we want the center of the mortise to be, and then position the leg on the tenon jig aligned with the center mark, and set our stop block accordingly. So the only mortise that we actually have to set up is the first one. And then after that, everything rolls off of the stop block, and we can repeat those mortise positions without having to mark each one. We're ready to cut all 8 mortises in the bottom legs. Setting up for the opposite side of the bottom mortise, we're going to use the same layout line as we had before, and we're just reversing the stop block to the other side. So I'm going to line that center mark, put the stop block up, tighten it, and we're ready to cut. Now that I have 2 mortises cut in the top and bottom of each leg, and all the cross members are mortised, it's time to make the loose tenon stock. First step in making the loose tenon is to take some material and plane it down to the thickness of the tenon. In this case we used a 1/2 inch spiral upcut bit, so we're going to plane this down to 1/2 inch. Next step, over at the table saw, we're going to rip 2.5 inch wide pieces create the loose tenons. I now have a board that's the correct thickness to fit in the mortise. However, I need to round over all four sides of the tenon stock for it to fit into the mortise. We're going to do that on the router table with a 1/4 inch round over bit on all four edges of each piece of tenon stock. Now that I have the stock rounded over on all four sides, I'm going to cut the tenons to length using my crosscut saw and the table saw. I've set up a stop block to make reproducible lengths, and I'll cut 32 loose tenon pieces. We're ready to begin assembling our tool stand. The first step that we're going to do is dry fit all the pieces to ensure that everything goes together nicely and we won't have any problems when we apply glue. The tenons should fit snug and go in without having to hammer them in. We're going to assemble the table in 2 halves, and when those are dry and ready, we'll put the table together as a whole. So we have a nice dry fit. Everything looks good. We're going to take it apart and assemble it with glue. Okay, for the glue up, I like to put glue in the mortise using a foam brush, and you don't need a lot. If your tenons fit snug, then a little bit of glue on the tenon. And I do these in halves. Just put glue on the half that I'm inserting now. As well as a little bit of glue on the tenon itself. Now the tenons were cut short enough that they won't bottom out in the mortise. So we should be able to achieve a nice tight fit. And they should lock down, and I'll align them with the top. Two clamps on each assembly is sufficient pressure while the glue dries. The only additional thing we're going to do is make sure that the cross member is aligned with the top of the legs, and check the assembly for square, measuring diagonally across. To join the 2 halves, we're going to set this aside to dry and get the next 4 mortises.